Now that you've reviewed the local policy and know how to complete data entry, let's talk about the Supportive Services Request and Return procedure. This includes where to find and how to use the online Supportive Service request forms. First, let's talk about why we decided to develop this procedure. Previously, our Purchasing and Records Clerk, Anna, received hundreds of supportive service requests each year using a PDF or a paper supportive service request form. In this process, case managers should have reviewed the local policy and known what documentation to submit with the request. However, this did not always happen. Remember, we're spending public funds on supportive services. We must have accurate documentation before we can process these requests. Anna estimates that 80% of the requests she received weren't able to be processed immediately because information was missing. So in program year 2024, we had over 400 supportive services purchased through requests. This means at least 320 requests were delayed because more information was needed to process them. Not only does this create more work for the purchasing and records clerk, case managers, and supervisors, it also means lots of customers experienced a delay in getting the supportive services they needed. After much discussion about the current process, our agency decided to move to online forms for supportive service requests. This procedure was tested by case managers and supervisors. This procedure ensures any required information is collected at the time the case manager submits a supportive service request. It automates the review and approval process for supervisors and the purchasing and records clerk. That means requests are reviewed in a timely manner and critical supportive services are delivered to customers quickly and efficiently. It's your responsibility as a case manager and supervisor to review and be familiar with the entire procedure, because this is what will help us effectively and efficiently provide support to our customers. Let's quickly review the process workflow for requesting supportive services using the online forms. You can find this on page 7 of the procedure. First, the case manager meets with the customer to determine needs and then case notes the need for supportive service. The case manager should determine if the need can be met with cash equivalents. If not, then they'll start a supportive service request by completing an online form. The case manager submits the form, which goes to the supervisor for approval. The supervisor will either approve the request more information, or they might deny it. Once the supervisor verifies all the correct information is on the form and that the supportive service is needed, the request is sent to Purchasing and Records. The Purchasing and Records clerk purchases the items and notifies the case manager that they are on the way. If the case manager requested an item like textbooks, work clothes, or technology, they ensure the items are delivered to the participant. Case managers should make a case note when the supportive service was distributed to the customer. For items that are sent to the case manager for distribution, case managers need to have the customer sign to confirm receipt of the item. The case manager submits the item received confirmation online form to the Purchasing and Records clerk and thus provides the packing slip or receipt to Purchasing and Records. Then the case manager enters another case note in Osmos that the item was delivered. Now let's go through an example so we can look at the new supportive service forms. Let's submit a supportive service request for IMA customer. The career advisor has had a detailed discussion with IMA. She is starting her CNA training program and needs scrubs for the program. Let's start the supportive service request procedure. You might want to have a copy to reference. Step number 1 is to determine the type of supportive service needed. This is where you need to have a conversation virtually, on the phone, or in person about the customer's situation and their needs. We know from the previous slide what IMA's needs are. You need to document why the service is needed in case notes according to the funding program's guidelines. You also need to document the barrier being addressed by the service. Step 2 is to complete the supportive service request form online. We're going to go to the shared Google Drive for supportive services and find the document that has the links to the forms. Please remember, you're not going to get access to the Google Drive folder until after you complete this training. Go to Google Drive and click on Shared Drives. Find the Supportive Service Requests folder, and then click on the Supportive Services Form information. Before you complete the form, let's talk about a few important things. Remember, the information and documentation needed to purchase a supportive service depends on the item you're requesting. For example, there are different documents required for phone-related expenses versus clothing, shoes, and related items. You can find this information on the new online forms, and we'll go over that in a minute. There are now different request forms for the different types of services. Links to each form are in this document. These include clothing, shoes, and related items, gas cards, phone-related expenses, technology, textbooks and school supplies, tools, vehicle insurance policies, vehicle registration, and vehicle repair. Consult your supervisor if the request you're making does not fall under one of these forms. You also need to make sure the supportive service can be purchased from an approved vendor. This list is linked in each form, and I'll show you where to find it later in this video. Now back to our example. We'll complete the form to order IMA scrubs. Let's go to the Supportive Service Form Links document again, and we'll click on the Clothing, Shoes, and Related Items link. So before you submit a form, make sure you read the important information section at the start. It has a link to the procedure, the information needed for the specific request, and this is where you can find the approved vendors list. For IMA scrub request, we need to be prepared to provide her information, your supervisor's information, the funding source, and the item details. Make sure you use a vendor from the approved vendors list whenever possible. If you must use another vendor, there's a form you can complete to request to use them. You'll also see a reminder about item delivery. For IMA scrub request, we need the following information: the items that need to be ordered, including the color, size, and the vendor, web links to the items for the request, and web links to backup items in case the top choice is out of stock. Before we complete the form, let's locate scrubs to order. IMA has told us she needs 2 pairs of scrubs, one in navy and one in purple, both size medium, and she needs them 2 weeks from today. For this demo, we're going to look at Amazon because they are an approved vendor. So first we'll search for women's navy scrubs. Now when you're determining what items to order, remember to find the lowest cost item and look at the date the item is expected to arrive. If the customer needs it tomorrow, but it won't ship for 3 weeks, you'll have to find another item. In this case, we're looking for scrubs that can be delivered within 2 weeks. And remember, in some cases, and for some items, you might be able to obtain it quickly or more quickly if you pick it up from a local store. Here are our Amazon results. It looks like this brand is the least expensive option. So let's make sure they have the size and the colors. And it looks like this brand is available in both color choices. Also, it will be delivered within 2 weeks. I'm going to copy the links and save them for when we complete the form. We also need to grab a link to a backup item. It looks like these scrubs are the second least expensive. We'll just make sure it's got color choices and sizing, and it looks like it does. So I'm going to grab this link for our backup choice. Now let's go back to the online form. Let's complete this form for IMA. So on the first page of the form, under the Case Manager and Supervisor Information section, you'll enter your name and email. Then you'll enter your supervisor's name and email. And for the purpose of demonstrating this, I'm listing myself as the case manager and as the supervisor. You would be entering your name and your supervisor's name as appropriate. Then you'll need to confirm you're requesting items on the approved vendors list. And we know that Amazon is an approved vendor, so I'm going to say yes and click Next. On page 2, you'll need to input the customer's information along with a description of why they need the service. So I've entered Ima's name, her OSMIS ID, and the funding source. If the customer has an OSMIS ID, you should enter it on this form. In some cases for JMG, you don't have an OSMIS ID for your customer, you would just leave this blank. Now we need to explain why the customer needs a supportive service. So I'm actually going to go back to my case note and pull that information. I'm going to paste this here. This is information that the supervisor will review and use to determine whether or not they approve your supportive service request. On the next page, we're going to enter the date when the customer needed the item. So we know that Ima needs her scrubs in 2 weeks. So today I'm filming this, it's March 19th. We'll say that she needs them by April 2nd. Now, if Ima needed these scrubs yesterday, I would actually put in yesterday's date. And that way, when your supervisor and the purchasing and records clerk review these requests, they'll know to prioritize it because the item is needed sooner rather than later. Now we'll need to fill out this table with the requested item information. So we're going to need to put in 2 different items because we need 2 different colors of the same scrubs. Here I've entered the link to order the navy scrubs, and I need to add another item so we can order the scrubs in purple. I'm just going to click add another item and enter the information. Here I've entered the information for the purple scrubs. Now we're going to need to enter the total cost for both pairs of scrubs, including shipping. This is something that you need to manually calculate. Unfortunately, we can't automatically add up the cost of this. And also, too, you need to include the shipping. So for these items, shipping was free, so the total came to $39.98. Now we're going to enter the delivery information. Ima is a customer in Traverse City, so we'll enter that for the location. I also want to note that only JMG specialists can request items be delivered to a high school. So, for example, if you are a WIOA career advisor who works with adults who aren't at a high school, you would need to have the item delivered to the service center. And looks like this form is ready to submit. Before I submit it to my supervisor for approval, I'm going to click back through it to make sure the information I provided is accurate, and I can do that using the back button. So I'll pause the video and meet you back here after I've reviewed the form. Everything looks good. Let's submit it to our supervisor by clicking the Submit button. You'll see the confirmation page that outlines what's next in the supportive service request process for the form you submitted. Here's the email that you'll receive as the case manager when submitting the supportive service form online. You can see in the subject line it'll tell you the type of request and the name of the customer and the funding source. So that might be helpful to you if you have to search your email for this. But basically, it just sends you a copy of your form submission. Keep in mind, it may take a few minutes for you to get the automated email after you submit the form. Your supervisor will also receive an email asking them to review your request. Again, it may take a few minutes for them to get that email after you submit the form. Now, there's 3 things that might happen after you submit a request. First, your supervisor approves your request as is because you submitted all required documentation and information. Or, your supervisor may need more information from you before approving the request, or your request was denied. In all of these cases, you'll get an email notifying you about your supervisor's decision and the PRC clerk's decision once the request reaches that point. Make sure you read these emails. Here's a sample more information needed email. You can see the supervisor wants information about how the supportive service will address the barrier. You can make changes to the original form you submitted if revisions are needed. Just click on the link to edit. This will bring up the original form you submitted. Once you make the appropriate changes, you can resubmit to your supervisor. Here's a sample approval email. If you read it, you will see that the request is automatically sent to the purchasing and records clerk after your supervisor approves it. If your supervisor denies your request, they'll include a comment about why it was denied. Once a request is reviewed by the purchasing and records clerk and they determine all the required documentation has been submitted, they will procure the service. If the service is an item that will be shipped, like clothing, the purchasing and records clerk will send the case manager an email notifying you the item has been ordered and its expected shipment date. Now we're in step 4. The case manager receives the order. You are responsible for receiving the order. Again, most items will be shipped directly to the service center. For JMG, they may be delivered to a school. If you request an item for curbside pickup, you, the case manager, have to pick it up from the store. If the shipment included a packing slip, remember to save it for the customer's records in case an item needs to be returned. Now the moment we've all been waiting for, step 5, distribute the item to the customer. For items, the customer needs to verify that they are correct and undamaged before they take it from the center. For example, Ima needs to make sure that her scrubs are the right size and color. The customer should confirm in writing that they received the item. You can do this by having the customer sign and date the packing slip if you received one, and then keep the signed slip in the customer's file. If you don't have a packing slip, you can complete a receipt for the item and have the customer sign and date it. Give one copy to the customer and keep the other in the customer's file. Document that you distributed the item in OSMIS case notes and the supportive service section, or according to program funding guidelines. For example, JMG does not use OSMIS. Refer to the local policy for supportive services for case note requirements. Step number 6 applies if you received an item that was delivered to a service center or school, like scrubs, tools, textbooks, and technology like laptops. You need to confirm you received the items using the Items Received Confirmation form. You can find the link to it in the same document as the supportive service request form links. Remember to review all the information on the first page of the form before you submit it. And also a reminder that you only need to submit this form for items like clothing, shoes, textbooks, school supplies, tools, technology like laptops that you receive at your service center. You do not need to submit the form for other types of supportive services that are vehicle related or phone related. So let's quickly fill out this form for IMA. So for the purposes of today's demonstration, I'm putting in Joy's name as the name of the case manager, but my emails. And in this case, we did not receive a packing slip for the item. So I'm going to select no. I'll list the items that were received. And then I'm going to click submit. And this form is going to go to the purchasing and records clerk. Now, if we had received a packing slip, I would simply have clicked yes. And then I would have been asked to upload a copy of that packing slip. But as we said, in this case, no packing slip. So we actually have to fill out this information and click submit. And just like the other supportive service online forms, you'll get an email confirmation once you have submitted the item received confirmation form. At times, you may need to request a supportive service that does not have a corresponding online form. If that's the case, contact your supervisor and they will assist you in making that supportive service request. Let's talk about what happens if a supportive service item is ordered but then needs to be returned. We know occasionally items may need to be returned, and we can return them if they are damaged on arrival, are the wrong size, or are the wrong color. There's a 3-step process to request returns. First, complete the supportive service item return form. Let's say we need to return one set of IMA scrubs because the delivered items were red instead of blue. Like the other forms, you need to enter your information and your supervisor's name and the customer information. And through the magic again of video, we have all that information entered, including the funding source. Then we need to submit confirmation the item was received. In this case, we only have the date we received the item. If we had the packing slip, it would be really helpful for the purchasing and records clerk to have that. But we're just going to enter the date that we received the scrubs, which was March 21st. I'm going to click next. And then we need to describe the item we're returning. So here I've entered the scrubs we are returning, and the reason why is that they are the wrong color. The vendor it was purchased from was Amazon, and the product was not used and the tag is intact. And yes, we're requesting that the item be replaced with the correct color. Select yes, and then list the size and color we want for the replacement item. And here I've specified what we need in return. The same scrub, size medium in navy blue. And no, the item was not damaged when we received it, or I could put not applicable. And if I had any additional comments, I could enter them here. So for example, Ima needs these scrubs as soon as possible because her program is starting. And then I'll click submit. You'll get a confirmation page. This will be sent to the purchasing and records clerk. Now, step number 2 is very important. You now need to wait for the purchasing and records clerk to review this form and give you instructions for next steps. So the purchasing and records clerk will provide you with return instructions, including the time frame for the return window and a return label if applicable. Step number 3 is it's your responsibility as the case manager to return the item within the return window time frame. For example, if IDA scrubs had a tear in them when they arrived and the PRC clerk says you have 5 days to return them, it's your responsibility to get them in the mail within that 5-day window to ensure the agency gets the refund. We've covered a lot in this video: how to complete an online supportive service request, submit confirmation when you receive that item, and then how to initiate a return request. We recommend that you bookmark this video and the procedure to refer to for future reference. You may want to refer to it for the first couple of times you submit an online supportive service request form. If you have questions about supportive service requests, please start with your supervisor. If you're a case manager, you can head back to Google Classroom and take the Supportive Services Training Quiz. If you're a supervisor, you'll need to watch the video about supportive service requests review and approval procedures.